Today I'm going to give you guys 5 tight ends you can draft that'll make you look like a fantasy genius this season. I already did running backs and receivers. Make sure to check those out. I'll have them linked in the description. Every tight end on this list is currently available after the first 6 rounds, and they can definitely outperform their ADPs. I'm not a big believer in drafting tight ends early. I just think there's way more valuable picks at other positions like running back and receiver in those first 4 to 6 rounds. Almost all the teams that have won these championships in the past did not boast from those early elite tight ends. But you can definitely get a top 8 to top 10 tight end later in your drafts and still have a really real chance to win it all. So we're going to dive right in here with the first tight end on my list. And this is a player who I've been targeting in all my best ball drafts. I'm planning on targeting him in all my redraft drafts. And that's Evan Ingram. So Evan Ingram currently has an ADP of about 103. He's being drafted as the tight end 8 around the 7th round in most PPR drafts. The Broncos were in desperate need this offseason for a tight end, and they went out and signed Evan Ingram this offseason. Evan Ingram did not have the best season last year in Jacksonville. He missed almost half the year, and to be frank, the Jags were just really bad last year. But only 2 seasons ago, he was the PPR tight end 2 in all fantasy, and the season before that, he was the tight end 5. So we've seen some consistent elite receiving capabilities from Evan Ingram 2 straight years, and he is one of the best elite receiving tight ends in the league. And now he finds himself on a Denver offense that's honestly lacking established receivers outside of Courtland Sutton. So I expect Evan Ingram to be a PPR monster for Bo Nix and for fantasy this year. And this should be a pretty effective offense under Sean Payton like we saw last year. So he is a phenomenal target for fantasy players in the middle of drafts. And he's honestly my favorite tight end target this year considering what his ADP is right now. Because you get a guy with realistic top 5 potential or top 5 upside at the position where you don't have to use an early pick on a tight end. And then next up, we have Tucker Kraft of the Green Bay Packers. So Tucker Kraft currently has an ADP of about 134, which makes him the tight end 12 and a 9th round pick. So Tucker Kraft emerged as the tight end 1 in Green Bay last year in a sophomore season. So if you need any proof of that, don't look any further than these numbers. The other 2 tight ends on this team, Luke Musgrave and Ben Sims, combined for 11 receptions, 87 yards, and 0 touchdowns last year. Kraft alone had 70 receptions, 707 yards, and 7 touchdowns. So he's obviously carved out a really significant role on this offense by simply consistently showing up for Jordan Love. Jordan Love's receivers in Green Bay take turns being that guy for like a 2-week span and then they disappear. We've seen this over the last 2 years with Jordan Love. But Tucker Kraft was reliable every single week, and you can't ask for more than that out of your tight end for a young quarterback like Jordan Love. So in the 9th round, I believe you are getting a top 10 to top 12 fantasy tight end, and he's a really solid target over there in that 9th, 10th round range. So real quick, you're already at an advantage this season by being here on Yam Talks, but let me help you even more. Over the next few weeks, I'll be dropping my fantasy football draft guide to the public. As a computer scientist, I've created advanced AI and machine learning models on top of my countless hours of research that could give you that winning edge this season. This guide will have all my rankings, notes, projections, and so much more. You can pre-order the guide at a discounted price by emailing me or messaging me on X today. I'll have everything linked in the description. The price you pay today is the price you pay for the rest of your life. So as I increase the price each summer, as my channel grows and I introduce more advanced models, you always pay what you pay today. So with all that out the way, we're going to go to the next tight end. All right, so this offseason, the Bengals had some big decisions to make regarding paying some of these guys on their offense. Joe Burrow publicly stated he wanted Jamar Chase. He wanted T. Higgins back. But there was a third guy on his wish list this offseason, and that was Mike Gesicki, and that's the third tight end on our list today. So Burrow wanted Gesicki back because he played, honestly, a really important role in this dynamic offense last year. And in fantasy, Mike Gesicki was the PPR tight end 13 last season. And if you've been watching my channel this summer, you know I'm high on all the Bengals offensive players for fantasy this year. And that's due to the fact that their defense still blows. And Joe Burrow knows their defense still blows. That's why he demanded that T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and Mike Gesicki are back next year because they did find success on that offense with these guys. So now we got the news that Shamar Stewart might not even play for Cincinnati this year, their first-round pick. Trey Hendrickson's still holding out. So with all that, like we saw this number put up elite offensive numbers in fantasy last year because they had to score on every drive to be competitive in games, and that's not going to change this year. So with Mike Gesicki, you're banking on that game script over there in Cincinnati as Joe Burrow's tight end 1. So if you're adopting a late tight end draft strategy, this is my favorite target in like the end of your drafts or the back half of like your best ball drafts, because you're snagging a guy who has top 10 upside at the position in, like I said, like the 10th or 12th round, whatever it is later in drafts. So next we move on to Jags tight end Brenton Strange. So I do think Brenton Strange this year is going to have a breakout year. He currently has an ADP of about 166. He's being drafted as a tight end 20. So you can snag him literally at the end of your redraft drafts or the back quarter of your best ball drafts. So with the guy we spoke about only minutes ago leaving Jacksonville and Evan Ingram, Brenton Strange now steps in as the tight end 1 on this team. But lucky for us, we do have a small sample size of what we could expect out of Brenton Strange in his 3rd season in the NFL. So between weeks 2 and 5, Brenton Strange was the starting tight end with Evan Ingram sidelined with injury, and T-Law was still in at quarterback at this point of last season. In that 4-game stretch, he finished as a top 9 PPR tight end 3 times, 3 out of the 4 weeks. And Strange was also the starter between weeks and 15 when Ingram was out with injury, but T-Law was out during the stretch and Mac Jones was in. So these 4 games aren't the best indicator to me because you're comparing him with not who's going to be his quarterback next year and a way better quarterback than Mac Jones. But for what it's worth, he did finish as a tight end 2 in week 15 with 18.3 PPR points. So we saw a lot of flashes out of Brenton Strange last year, and now he's an offensive guru coming in Liam Cohen as their head coach, and hopefully a healthy T-Law all season. So look for him to build off the momentum and some of the positive footing he did find last year, and he has the potential to finish as a top 12 tight end. And with the 14th round price tag, this is a super low risk pick for you, and it's just a player. If you're adopting a late tight end strategy or just need a backup tight end, feel like I'm definitely would be targeting this guy. And then next we got the last tight end on our list, and that's Cade Otton for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So his ADP is at about 183, which makes him undrafted in a lot of redraft leagues. But last year, in his 3rd season in the NFL, he took a big step, finishing as a 600-yard tight end. And in fantasy, he finished as a tight end 14, but he only played in 14 games. And in those 14 games, he was averaging a very solid 10 points a game in PPR, which is honestly more than you can ask for if you're adopting a late tight end strategy, especially if you're not drafting a tight end to like the last 6 rounds. And this is a really strong Bucs offense, but my only concern with Otton this season is that there's a lot of mouths to feed on this offense with a bunch of high ceiling wide receivers and a young promising running back room. But if we've learned anything over the last 2 years, that Baker Mayfield has proven that he can air the ball out and he can feed a lot of mouths on his offense and keep guys involved. So there are going to be weeks where Cade Otton is a top 10 fantasy tight end, but I also think there's going to be weeks where he's not a top 20 fantasy tight end. So it's going to be a lot of boom or bust. But for a redraft, you're literally getting one of the better young tight ends and one of the better young fantasy options in the last round of drafts or even after your drafts in waivers. And in best ball, he's a very promising target as your 2nd or 3rd tight end at literally the back 4 or 5 rounds of your drafts. So those are 5 tight ends I'm absolutely going to be looking to target, and I think you should be looking to target if you're not looking to spend a pick on a tight end in the first 6 rounds. And with all that, I'm going to have the quarterback video out soon in the next few weeks, so keep an eye out for that, and thanks for tuning in.